Okay, so we want to talk about blood chemistry and how that changes your respiratory rhythm, how it changes when you breathe. Okay, so the first thing is chemoreceptors are going to monitor pH of the blood, the carbon dioxide level of the blood, and the oxygen level. And it's not just blood, it can be body fluid, so it could be cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, now the peripheral chemoreceptors are found in the aortic bodies and the carotid bodies. So the aorta and the carotid arteries, which kind of makes sense, right? It's the blood that's going to your body and the blood that's going to your brain. Okay, so they're called peripheral. And the aortic bodies are going to signal the medulla, the respiratory center, using the vagus nerves, and the carotid signals it by the glossopharyngeal nerves. Okay, now the central chemoreceptors, these are the big ones. Okay, so they're responsible for 75% of the changes. They're found on the medulla oblongata. And the big thing that they do is they're going to monitor the pH of the cerebral spinal fluid, so the CSF. Okay, so you guys know that cerebral spinal fluid, I think. Okay, now I put this in this yellow box. So the pH of the body fluids is the biggest stimulus for changing respiratory rate. Okay, so this is the number one thing that changes it. Okay, the second thing is carbon dioxide levels, and then the third thing is the oxygen levels. So pH is the primary thing that's going to change your respiratory rate. Okay, so effects of hydrogen ions. So the hydrogen ions are going to change the pH of the CSF. Okay, so we can go into what's called respiratory acidosis. Okay, if the pH is less than 7.35. Okay, so 7.35 is the magic number. Okay, now this can be caused by hypercapnia. Okay, so what that means is that our carbon dioxide level is greater than 43 millimeters, so greater than 43 in the blood. Okay, so what happens, why this is a problem, is that the carbon dioxide can easily cross the BBB, which BBB is the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so it can easily cross it. Okay, then once it gets into the cerebral spinal fluid, okay, it reacts with water, and it's going to release hydrogen ions. Okay, and then what's going to happen is the chemoreceptors will detect this change in hydrogen, this increase in hydrogen ions, and they're going to stimulate the inspiratory center so that you'll breathe more. Okay, so if we have hypercapnia, okay, so we have, we have CO2, right? So we have an increase in CO2, binds with the water. Okay, it forms H2CO3. Okay, and then we're going to go this way, right? Our equation's going this way because this is what's in excess. So we have hydrogen, and then we'll have HCO3 negative. Okay, so if we get an increase in hydrogen ions, that means that our pH drops. Okay, and we become acidic. Okay, so what happens to correct for respiratory acidosis is we hyperventilate. Okay, so we hyperventilate in an effort to blow off the carbon dioxide. Okay, so we're trying to get rid of the carbon dioxide, and we're trying to make the equation go the other way. Okay, so we're trying to make this equation go this way. Okay, so CO2 leaves. Okay, now what can cause respiratory acidosis? Okay, so things that can cause it would be something where you're using pulmonary function. Okay, something's wrong with your lungs. Okay, so if something's wrong with your lungs, then that's going to cause us to not be able to blow out enough carbon dioxide. Okay, now respiratory alkalosis is the opposite. Okay, so the pH is greater, and so it's 7.35. Okay, so it could be caused by hypocapnia. Okay, so a lower carbon dioxide level. So it's less than 37. Okay, so it's corrected by slowing your breathing down, hypoventilation. Okay, so it's going to push this reaction the other direction. Okay, so it's going to push it this way. So essentially what we're doing is we're increasing the hydrogen ions in our body fluids, and that's going to take our pH back to normal, lower it to normal. Okay, this is not as common as acidosis. Acidosis is more common. So what happens here is something's going on and you're blowing off more CO2 than we make. Okay, so say somebody's hyperventilating. Okay, now pH imbalances can also be caused by metabolic things. Okay, so things other than pulmonary problems. Okay, so one cause is diabetes mellitus. So what happens if your diabetes isn't under control is that you can start breaking down fats instead of breaking down sugars, and that can cause you to go into what's called ketoacidosis. So ketoacidosis is you're breaking down ketones, or you're making too many ketones. This is when their breath might smell fruity. So if you don't know they have diabetes, you might think they're drinking. The way that our body tries to compensate for this is by changing the respiratory rate. Okay, so there's a type of breathing that occurs with ketoacidosis, which is called Kussmaul respiration or Kussmaul breathing. So they're breathing deeply and rapidly. Okay, and it's very, very typical of someone that is in ketoacidosis. Okay, now carbon dioxide, the way that it's going to affect the respiration rate is through changing the pH. Okay, so this is the main way it affects your respiration rate. Okay, now the second way is it could have a direct effect. So carbon dioxide could stimulate these peripheral chemoreceptors. So maybe when you're exercising, okay, and you're getting too much carbon dioxide buildup because you're going through a lot of cellular respiration, and that can trigger ventilation and cause through your brain, okay, and cause you to breathe harder. Okay, now oxygen usually has very little effect. Okay, so you have to remember in pneumonia, if all the breathing is okay, the hemoglobin is actually 97% saturated with oxygen. Okay, so if everything is going all right, we are carrying a lot of oxygen. Okay, now there are some things that can stimulate hypoxic drive. So hypoxic drive is if the oxygen is controlling it. So if someone has chronic hypoxemia, okay, their oxygen, the partial pressure of their oxygen is less than 60. Okay, that can stimulate ventilation. Okay, and that could be caused by emphysema, pneumonia, or if someone's at a high altitude, like altitude sickness for a long time. That can put someone into hypoxic drive. Okay, so oxygen imbalances. So I have hypoxia. So there's a bunch of different categories of hypoxia. So there's hypoxemic hypoxia. So this is due to inadequate pulmonary gas exchange. So I have some lists: high altitudes, drowning, aspiration. Something is damaged maybe in your medulla, so you go into respiratory rest. Degenerative lung disease, and then carbon monoxide poisoning. So carbon monoxide poisoning, carbon monoxide actually, CO, competes with oxygen for the iron on hemoglobin, and it's actually better at binding to it than your oxygen is. So that's why carbon monoxide poisoning is so bad. Ischemic hypoxia means you have, I should have made more room, inadequate blood flow. Inadequate circulation of blood. Anemic means you're anemic, your blood can't carry the oxygen. Yeah, hold on. Okay, so cyanosis is the blue color when your skin turns blue, when your oxygen is low. Someone's cyanotic, they turn blue. Primary effect of hypoxia is that the tissue starts to die, and what happens is organs that have a high metabolic demand actually die first because they need more oxygen to survive. Okay, now oxygen excess. Okay, so there is such a thing as oxygen toxicity. So this is when pure oxygen is inhaled or breathed at a very high pressure, so 2.5 atmospheres or greater. What happens is that the oxygen can generate free radicals, and the free radicals, they kind of bounce around and they destroy enzymes, they destroy nervous tissue, they can cause seizures or coma and death. So a long time ago, okay, they used to treat, okay, so with the premature babies, right? And remember they didn't have the surfactant. So without the surfactant, they wouldn't breathe very well. So they used to give them a pure oxygen and try to have them help them out that way. And what happened is it damaged a lot of their retinas, so they went blind. So they don't do that anymore, or they don't do it very often. So that the oxygen can generate free radicals, it can generate hydrogen peroxide. Now, hyperbaric chamber they are used. Okay, so they're actually very useful. They used to use it to transfer. Here's what I was talking about: treat premature infants, but they don't do it for that anymore. But they do use it for wound healing. Okay, so that helps. They do use it for things like carbon monoxide poisoning. If somebody is scuba diving and they have the bends, so they have nitrogen built up in their blood, they can displace it. So decompression illness is what they call that. Some rich people have them. Like Michael Jackson had one, I think, that he hung out in. Okay, now, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorders. Okay, so COPD is long-term obstruction of airflow and reduced pulmonary ventilation. Okay, so you can't get air in, you can't get air out. Okay, asthma is caused by allergens that actually can trigger the release of too much histamine, and the histamine causes the bronchi to to constrict. Okay, and then the air can't get in or out. Okay, so there are other COPDs that are typically associated with smoking, but not all the time. So chronic bronchitis, so the cilia don't sweep. Okay, so typically, right, our passageway is lined with cilia, and the cilia are sweeping the mucus up. Okay, and this is called the mucociliary escalator. Okay, so mucociliary escalator, it sweeps it up, and we swallow the mucus and we don't even realize it. But someone that smokes, the cilia are destroyed, the cilia are paralyzed or broken off. Okay, and we can't sweep, so we have to cough to get it out. So you get a chronic phlegmy cough, lots of sputum, and this is an awesome place for organisms to grow. Emphysema, I mentioned earlier. This is when the alveolar walls break down. Okay, so COPDs also reduce the pulmonary compliance. It reduces vital capacity. It can cause hypoxemia, hypercapnia. You can go into respiratory acidosis. Okay, it also is going to stimulate the release of EPO. Okay, and that can cause polycythemia, and it can eventually put enough stress on your heart that the right side of the heart develops hypertrophy, so it gets bigger, and then it causes the heart to fail. I think that is the last slide I have in here.